Okay.
Excellent. All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Dear colleagues as well, I would like to introduce myself first, and then without further ado, we'll jump into one of the most exciting topics, the very, very trendy topics. So my name is Irina Kim Sen, and I am one of the owners of the company called Miami Vertical Garden. So as the name stands for itself, this is something that we've been doing and actually specializing on design, installation, and maintenance of the vertical gardens, living walls, green walls, whatever you use the term to call those installations. So we've been doing this for the last 10 years. So this year we're celebrating our anniversary. Since 2013, the first wall has been installed in residential project. You will see a picture of it later in the presentation, and it's still has a regional plant selection for the last 10 years. So I consider myself like having a role to actually share with you an expertise on what we've been focusing on for the last 10 years in South Florida. Most of our projects are residential, high-end residential. I would say 70% are residential and 30% are commercial projects. Since Cheryl just left, so if some people will be joining us during the presentation, I certainly have to pause and admit them. So I apologize for a little bit of technical inconveniences, if any. So I hope everyone can hear me, everyone can see beautiful pictures. So let's just jump into the presentation. Oops. It doesn't change, okay. Yes, so a little bit of the housekeeping issues. Again, this is not for me to collect information to bother you with any spam on marketing on my end. This is needed for you to get a CE credit for this course. So if you are in the position where you would like to get this credit, could you please send me email, because I don't have the access to record everything during this presentation in the chat box. So it would be more convenient for me if you please send it all these five things to me as the email line by line. First name, last name, email, company, and the AIA member number or member ID. So if you could please do this, this would be very helpful. If you don't get this to me, I certainly cannot put you on a list, and then you will not get the CE credit. Thank you very much. So as I mentioned to you, there's different terms used for these installations. So living walls, green walls, we call them vertical gardens, and we do walls to inspire. So for us, besides the fact that it is part of the construction, it is part of the design. Therefore, I treat myself as your colleague as well at some degree, even though I'm not a professional architect or I'm not a professional designer, but I do treat it as art. And this is the message that we are bringing to all our installations. Every single living wall that we have done is very unique. It has beautiful appeal. So we're not just outsourcing people just to plug the plants into the wall. We treat it as very detail-oriented type of the installations. It's not floristics, so we're not targeting just to install something beautiful and in 3 months it's gonna die. We are really focusing on the fact that our living walls are sustainable, and therefore this presentation is designed not only just to give you an idea what is there out there about the living walls, so you know all the building blocks and components, how it's done, but I would love to give you a lot of confidence is that especially in our climate, living walls can be done in a very sustainable way and they will last. So I would like to set the right expectations so that you have all the information on hand to present to your clients and give them confidence about integrating living walls in the design. So unfortunately, I wish we can have this class in person, because I would love to ask you a lot of questions myself in terms of what kind of challenges are you facing, what kind of questions your clients are asking you when you only have just an idea or a vision to integrate the vertical garden in the project. From all the interactions that we had, we certainly know that a lot of people are concerned with the initial installation cost. That would be one of the questions. The second is definitely people are very concerned about how long it's gonna last. And number three is the cost of maintenance. So all of those questions, I hopefully by the end of this presentation, I will be able to answer. And then if you have more questions, please write them down, and I'll be more than happy to answer them at the end of this presentation. Just to point out, I put our Instagram account because the website doesn't get updated as frequently as the Instagram on a daily basis. So if you would like to see more about us, how we do things behind the scenes, we don't just show our final product, we show everything how we do things. So this will definitely be a good case study for you, as well as for you to give that peace of mind to the client and show them, refer them to the Instagram account so they can see themselves how things are done. All right, so the program for today consists of six parts. So first, I would like to share with you what's the trends, where the living walls have originated, and what's happening now in Miami, and why do we think that Miami is one of the top hubs to actually have the living walls in every single job, in every single project. I wish we cover the entire Miami with living walls, and hopefully this will happen. So we'll become the next Singapore. Number two is certainly, I would like to show you what are you dealing with when you're talking about what can be done in form of the vertical garden. We'll discuss the living wall applications, what makes them success. We will focus on several living wall systems, so you know the difference between them when you're comparing different products. And certainly I'll show you some examples of our portfolio so you can get inspired, as well as you will see how certain things actually were done for the purposes of knowing that all of this can be executed. So the world trends. So the living walls, actually, the father of the living walls is considered to be Patrick Blanc. You probably heard this name. He has done several installations in Miami. So those are one installation is in the restaurant called Juvia, which is located on Lincoln Road on the 8th floor. So that's his first living wall in Miami. And then he also did the columns in the Perez Museum of Art. Unfortunately, this is very, very sad. And again, it's a separate topic, but unfortunately, that project partially has failed due to lack of proper maintenance, irrigation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you have more questions, I have the answers for you. But recently, they have replaced the live plants with synthetic panels, which I think is a disaster, in my personal opinion, to have as a showcase in the most prestigious location as the museum. Another name, kind of like a trendsetter, is Stefano Boeri, is the architect from Italy. His famous project is called Vertical Forest. It's in Milan, so the entire building with integration of all kinds of greenery on all floors. And then the third person is Emilio Ambas, I guess this is the name, how to pronounce the name. So he's the architect designer from Argentina. He's also setting the trends for integration of ecosystems within the buildings. Oh, I'm sorry. If you look at the map now, we can see where are the most trendy places for the vertical gardens. My number one favorite, and you'll see two more slides about it, is Singapore. So Asia, particularly Singapore, certainly there are lots of living walls in China. There are lots of trends in Australia. In Europe, it's primarily France and Spain. In South America, it's in Brazil. In North America, it's Canada and United States. Also, there's some trends, particularly for cleaning the air, is in Mexico. All right, so the following 2 slides will show you something that will probably inspire you the most and will show the spectrum of how living walls are used. So this is an example of the botanical gardens in Singapore. It's called Gardens by the Bay. They have the largest indoor mountain, which is a man-made mountain, and everything is a vertical garden. So it's literally recreated structure of the mountain and covered with different layers of mesh. And all these plants are growing handmade, right? In using the principle of vertical gardening. And outside of this structure, which is the again part of the gardens by the bay, they have this beautiful, they call them gigantic trees, which is a true form of ecological system in which not only it collects the rainwater, it generates the energy, and it also grows the plants. So they have those big towers. They use them as presentation showcase, as an example of the ecosystem, as well as the light show. And this is the second slide that I wanted to bring to your attention from Singapore as well, where you will see that, I mean, when we arrived to Miami, I wish we could see something like this, again, arriving to a tropical place. So this is an extension to the existing airport in Singapore. It's called Changi Jewel Airport Component, which was built, and I believe it was launched, I mean, it was presented in 2017. It's a 1.3 billion live hub addition to the airport. So not only while you are in Singapore, you will arrive and see this beauty as part of your airport experience, but also people go there just to, there's movie theater, there's entertainment, there's different kinds of things, but primarily it's a beautiful indoor garden. And on the other spectrum, of course, where are these trends going? So vertical gardens. So this is an example of the whole city in Malaysia. It's called Iskandar, Malaysia, where the entire city is all built on the concept of having underground transportation. So all the cars are underground, as well as all the greenery is covering left, right, center, up and down, all over the place. You see vertical gardens, living walls, trellises, etc. So this project is already partially built. So right now it's in construction and it's Malaysia. There are beautiful videos about it. So you can actually type those names of the places and you will see the presentation videos. All right, so what are the spectrum of vertical gardens? So literally there are 4 things that are done with vertical gardens. So number 1 is certainly living walls and all forms of flat surface covering by the plants. The second example is what we call living sculpture. So where like I showed you with Singapore example, where the entire mountain is made of the vertical, like with the concept of vertical garden, as well as different sculptures. The closest to what you see on this picture, which is in Shanghai, in China, I saw in Atlanta Botanical Garden. They have an annual exhibition of vertical living sculpture. So on average, 10 to 13 different pieces of sculpture is presented in the garden, in the botanical garden, and all of those pieces are done by plants, are made of plants. Huge trend of growing food vertically, especially all kinds of greenery, herbs, etc. So tower gardens, aquaponics, hydroponics, all of this belong to the same industry, but more like for the purposes of food production. And finally, trellises. So all kinds of trellises, the rope wire systems where plants would grow from the ground up. And of course, it has several disadvantages, because if the plant reaching its mature level for some reason, for any negligent reason, has failed, so you losing the entire life of the plant that has been growing for years and years and years to reach that height. So trellises seem to be, they're certainly different than living walls where you can partially replace certain parts of it. All right, so let's talk a little bit about benefits. I'm not gonna just read from the slide, you can see everything there, but I want to emphasize a couple of statistics. So the industry has been developing rapidly, and therefore there's already some numbers here. So for example, it is calculated that the buildings which have living walls, they actually have 33% AC energy savings. Because the entire building gets cooled down, especially if the living wall is outside. The plants on the surfaces, they actually absorb 50% of sunlight and reflect 30% of sunlight. So that's why this cooling effect is possible. In most in the places where the living walls are integrated, definitely it's a very good noise insulation. So it absorbs, the living wall absorbs 41% more sound than a traditional wall cover, and noise reduction up to 9 decibel. And enhancing human health and well-being, it's 15%. The calculations are that the increase in productivity levels, 15%, longer, people would love to stay longer in those places, healing effect, more social interaction, health component, attention increase, focus increase in the workplaces where you have living walls. All right, and finally, where it's all going. Besides the fact that living walls are certainly used as part of the architecture, this is something that is becoming also a wow factor or branding component of specific places. So I would like to show you 2 images. One is the 2 images from Dubai, which is called Dubai Miracle Garden. So you can see it's a Guinness record largest vertical sculpture. So you can see the entire Boeing airplane of Emirates Airlines, which is literally covered by plant material, in this case, flowers. So they have this miracle garden of Dubai, where the entire grounds, it's made of as a circle, that's the plane, that's the grounds. And every single piece of installation, little houses, sculpture, figures, everything made of flowers. And at the bottom, I'm showing you example that I mentioned from the botanical garden in Atlanta, Georgia. So this is something that they do annually. It's actually sponsored by Home Depot, this exhibition. And so on average, they have 10 to 13 different sculptures. So let's go for the living wall applications. So living wall applications, certainly, this is something that now I'm gonna jump with, integrate our experience into this presentation. So this is an example of the vertical garden. This is our first installation in Miami in December 2013, private residence in Key Biscayne. So this is the wall that I mentioned to you that has been there for 10 years, and you'll see how it looks now. So this is living walls, vertical columns, or hanging gardens, you can call them differently. Columns, living columns, hanging gardens. And of course, vertical garden displays, when big brands, they actually spend a lot of money now to brand their places, have them as freestanding structures, having them as part of their events. For example, for the Miami Super Bowl, we actually had huge 6 installations just for that event. Success factors. So why do the living walls fail? I mean, this is the probably #1, let's say, limitation, or the question that people will address talking to any designer or architect, and really thinking that they're gonna waste their money by having the living wall in their property. So I will answer the questions right now, just give me a second. But the main idea behind every single living wall is #1 is growing medium in where the plants are gonna root, and number 2 is irrigation. There are some other components, but they become secondary because these are 2 major reasons why living walls fail. Improper growing medium, so plants simply do not have way to root, to catch something, to get constant moisture. And certainly second is how the water is distributed on the vertical surfaces. All right, so success factors, as I mentioned, growing medium and irrigation, and 3 more. Lighting, so depending on where the living wall is going to be located, for example, interior or exterior. So in the interior, very critical to have additional light. In the exterior, it's very critical to know whether it's facing south, west, north, and east. So therefore, based on the lighting, the plant selection will be also based. Oh, excuse me? Hello? All right. The plant selection will depend on the lighting as well. And obviously, as I mentioned when I was talking about Perez Museum with the columns, maintenance is one of the main aspects of sustaining the living wall. So to show you the installation, our first installation in Key Biscayne, this is how the living wall looked on the planting day, 8 months later, 3 years later, and now in December, it's gonna be 10 years old. So this is how it looks now. We are still maintaining it. So we've been with this wall and with the clients for 10 years. All right, so I'm gonna skip this slide. Again, this is just adding to the benefits of the living walls. And what really makes a difference now, I'm gonna jump into the into actual details. So vertical garden systems. So if you take every single product on the market, you can classify them into 3 groups. So you please take a look at them more like a column shape information. So the first type of the system is pocket-based living walls. Second, tray-based or container-based living walls. Typically, they are made of plastic. Oh, I'm sorry, let me jump back. Pocket-based are typically made of different type of material, but in majority of the cases, it's different type of wool or felt based products. The second system, tray-based, is done as a trays or individual stackable shelving. I call it shelving, where the plants are going to be inserted into either tray or individual container, etc. And therefore, those systems, I mean, I'm going to tell you the disadvantages of the system, of course, in a second, but those systems are typically made of plastic or fiberglass. And finally, on the third category of living walls is anything sponge-based. So it's typically a panel. So a panel is a building block of the system. And inside of it, it will have different layers of different medium. So we've seen and tested many different systems, but the principle is the same. The principle is that there will be some form of spongy type of the material, whether synthetic or real, like natural material. But what's good about the system is that it will have, let's say, 3 by 3 feet panel, so the roots can go within the panel anywhere. So I'm gonna talk about this now so you can see the difference. Within the pocket-based system, now let's go to the second level of this diagram. Within the pocket-based system, there could be 2. You can differentiate between the 2 types. Soil-based, so which means in each pocket, the plant will be just growing in the soil. And it doesn't matter whether it's wrapped in anything or people just take a whole pot and put this, the whole piece of the soil ball inside of the pocket. It doesn't matter, it's still soil. So soil-based is number 1. And number 2 in the pocket-based system is hydroponic. What that means is that instead of soil, there is a different medium that will cover the roots. In our case, that's why I framed the system. We are using pocket-based hydroponic system, which means that instead of soil inside of each pocket, we will have sphagnum moss. Sphagnum moss is the same material or the same natural material that is used for orchids. So sphagnum moss is type of the moss from the nature that doesn't decay, doesn't rot, and doesn't smell, but has super properties to retain the moisture. So this is what we're using that makes a huge difference. You will see later in the presentation why this is so critical. In the tray-based system, you can see it's 99%, unless I have not seen something new, it's soil-based trays. So either the container is being filled with the soil, or plants are planted inside, or individual pots are hand and then the plant grown in its own cell, or there could be even a system where you have a tray where they would just lay the potted plants at the angle so that the pots will soak into the water partially, but they still have they're still contained within this growing pot. So this is number 2. And finally, a hydroponic system, the sponge-based category of the products is hydroponic. As I explained, the reason why it's called hydroponic is that it does not have any soil inside. It has sponges of different, made of different materials, and therefore the plants actually can root within the sponge. And this is what we're using. So for the last 10 years, we have tried many different systems, many different products. And literally on the 2nd year of our experience, we made the conclusion to reduce the products to only 2. So we're using pocket-based hydroponic, and we're using the hydroponic panel. And let me explain what makes the difference. All right, so you would probably say, oh, you know, it's a good idea to have living wall. By why you so, I mean, besides the fact that I am passionate about what I do, I certainly would love to emphasize that when I started this business, I asked myself why no one has started it yet. My background is business marketing. So the first question, you do marketing research. So you ask yourself, if this is such a good thing, why no one is doing it? So I had my doubts 10 years ago. But now the more I know about living walls and the more I look at the map, I mean, what could it be? Where can you find a better place than Miami with its humid subtropical climate, 365 days of sunshine, very stable weather conditions, except a few hurricanes from time to time, not to have greenery all over the place? So let's go back, dive into the explaining why things work and why things don't, because we are here to learn sustainable living walls. So this is an example. The picture is from the Hard Rock Casino, and you know the guitar. So they have huge installation, interior, exterior of living walls. I still don't know how they're gonna resolve the issue, but so far, the installation is just draining the money because it requires a lot of plant replacement, and therefore it is a very high maintenance project. And what are the reasons for that? So as you can see, each individual plant is growing its individual container. That container has a wick which soaks into the water. So the assumption is that the plant somehow is gonna, like as if it has a straw and it's supposed to drink water from the source. So just imagine the process, right? Even if you are not into living walls, I think you will probably find it more complicated than even watering the plants from the top, or spraying them, or misting them, or doing something else. So the reality, yes, plants fail for 2 reasons. Reason number 1 is that it's soil-based. Reason number 2, irrigation. So what's wrong with the soil? So I want to literally engrave it in this presentation is what's wrong with soil-based living walls. If you bring any potted plant from Home Depot to your house, put it on your table, water it, have enough sunlight, etc., it will die in 6 months. What are the reasons? Reason number one is that the plant does not have any room to actually grow. So the healthy top of the plant depends on the healthy rooting system, because root is how the plant actually gets the nutrients. So you cannot expect a healthy plant if you do not have a healthy root. So by putting a plant into the limited container, you are limiting the plant to its maturity, so it cannot really grow. Yes, some installers claim that they create bonsai effect, and therefore the plant grows slowly, which is not really true. So this is number one, contained space for the plant. No room to grow, root that cannot grow. The second reason is that when plant is limited to its container, imagine every single container needs to get water. So in the systems that you will see on the market, engineering part of it is really doesn't make sense. So example, one of our direct competitors, they have a system where you have the layer of the planters, so, and then the second layer of the planters. So the irrigation line runs across on top of the first layer. So in order for the second layer to get the water has to overwater the top layer and then soak through to the next layer. Imagine, you will always have the top layer overwatered and the bottom layer will not have enough water. Also, if you never knew this, overwatering plants is more damaging for the plant than lack of water. The reason is that when the plant doesn't have enough water, it certainly dehydrates and you see this sad looking plant. But if you add water, the plant will survive. However, if you overwater the plant, then the plants will, the root of the plant is going to rot. And once the root is rotted, that means the plant has no way to get nutrients and to grow. So therefore, your plants are gonna keep dying and you keep replacing. So when you see different installations and when you see designs where everything is perfectly beautiful and clean, that only means that the plants have been constantly replanted or replaced. Because if it's a healthy, sustainable living wall, the plants will grow, the plants will thrive, the plants will change their shape. They cannot be all symmetrical, identical, photocopy of each other if the living wall is a sustainable living wall. So everything looking the same means that it was constantly changed, replanted. And many states, such as New York, they don't even have that as a criteria because they do expect, especially for outdoors, to replant their wall periodically. Here in Miami, we are trying to educate the customer that you have to have a criteria that your living wall should not be replanted all the time. It has to be a living work of art. So the system that we use, I'll just show you how it looks. As I mentioned to you, it's a 3x3 building block, inside of which there are layers of sponges, and they interlock with each other, creating the living wall. So the roots can grow inside. The irrigation line is inside of the panel, so the water saturates the sponge, and therefore the moisture is contained inside of the panel. The roots have enough room to grow throughout, etc., and develop. And the second system that we use is a pocket-based system. And as I mentioned to you, the difference that is made is not having soil inside of pockets, but to have sphagnum moss. Sphagnum moss is our growing medium, so it absorbs the moisture. This is how we would do the installation. So we would pre-plant the panels at the nursery, we have a nursery in Southwest Ranches, and then we would install the hardware, and then we install it on site, the planted panels. This is example how the columns are made. And now let's talk about irrigation. So there are principal two ways to do irrigation for living walls: open loop application and closed loop application. So the open loop application is what we prefer to do in all our installations, and we sometimes have to do closed loop applications when we don't have water. So open loop application means we directly connect to the water line, as well as we directly connect to the drainage. So this is an example on the left-hand side. And then on the right-hand side, you see at the base, like a water tank. So that base has two compartments, one compartment for equipment, little motor that will run the water. And the biggest portion of that compartment is water source. So this is what we call closed loop irrigation. We prefer to stay away from closed loop applications because it's a human factor. We do not want to be dependent on people forgetting to refill the water tank. So our ideal scenario is to have a closed loop application. Plus, two things that make huge difference, as I mentioned to you at the beginning, success factors of the living walls is growing medium, which we already discussed, soil versus hydroponic, and irrigation. So the difference that we have discovered throughout the process is that if you have just a drip line, typically a drip line will have bullets, right? Every 10 to 12 inch. So just imagine the water being distributed through the bullets can only go down by gravity force. No water is going to spread to the sides. And of course, for the living walls, we don't expect anyone to mist it, spray it, water it from outside manually. So it all has to be automated. So instead of having the bullets and instead of having the drip irrigation, what we have in our living walls is called sweat irrigation. So sweat irrigation is it's a fabric line where the water is dosed by pressure. So the water gets there, and by pressure, it soaks through the entire surface of the living wall, while the sphagnum moss absorbs the moisture. And that's what makes a huge difference in the outcome and success, survival rate of the plants. This is what I just explained, sweat and drip. The irrigation equipment, we also, a lot of installation are just done just simply by having hooked to the water and the timer. In our case, we know it already through the 10-year experience, is that the plants cannot just survive with just based on the water. Not only the water has to be filtered, okay, so it has to be clean water, but also we have to add nutrients. If you do not add nutrients, it's like you are not going to feed the wall with food. So we have what is called, you can see on the picture, the blue element, it's called dazotron. And you can see the bucket. The bucket contains nutrients. So through dazotron, we add nutrients to all our living walls. In terms of like where the equipment has to go for the living wall, we had all kinds of scenarios. We had it on a different floor, behind under the sink, in a different room, on the ceiling. All kinds of setups are possible. And it doesn't matter how close we are, the irrigation unit to the actual wall, as long as it can be accessible, certainly for the service. And we do have the water line and the drain line at the place of the living wall, at the location of the living wall. Lighting. Lighting is very critical for interior installations. So when people say, okay, we want to do the living wall in this living room, etc., my first question is, how is your lighting situation in the room? Just to compare, you see a nice kind of infographics on the left side. So a typical office will have 30 foot candles, a supermarket 50, basketball court 100. Living wall requires 150 foot candles because you want the plants to have enough sufficient sunlight. So example on this picture is one of the offices. It's actually facing the pedestrian It has a big glass window, and so it's facing pedestrian walk. So the lights are on at 6 p.m. until 5 a.m. So that additional lighting is sufficient, and you can see those blooming anthuriums, the purple flowers and the red flowers, they are reblooming. So this is an example that things can grow, can thrive, and even can bloom with the proper lighting. Planting and design. So we are doing typically, a lot of people ask us, okay, we want to see the design of living wall, etc. I'm actually the one who designs all our installations since day one. And so far we've done more than 130 living walls, out of which we are currently maintaining 53 living walls. So that includes all installations, permanent installations, show installations, event installations, etc., etc. So the living wall design, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we are really treating ourselves as artists, because no matter how you draw it or you sketch it, unless it's a huge project, okay, it's always about looking at the contrast, the size of the plants, how the different textures will be good next to each other. We have tested more than 167 species, out of which we reduced our list to 50 plants that we work with. Some companies actually have only 10, variety of 10, and they only use 10 plants. We take advantage of our climate. We want to experiment. We always produce work of art. And this is an example of one of the last installations in Lagos Island. It's called 98 Lagos, for sale for $75 million. So I do initial sketch, kind of to have some configuration layout for the space, for the proportions, for the scale of work. But then when we start planting, you will see it on Instagram, we really use all the palettes of the plants as our crayons. So we literally draw it. We literally play with the colors and textures and sizes. So this is how it looks at the nursery when we do pre-planting. Through the experience, again, we learned that it's such a more efficient way to do it in-house than to actually install all the hardware on the job and then bring plants and plant it at the job. Our biggest installation, you will see it in a few seconds, is 2,000 Ocean building, front of the garage, 4th story. Just to give you a rough estimate, let me describe it when we get to the picture. So that whole job was certainly planted at our nursery. If we would have done, and it took us certainly a certain time to plant it at the nursery and then install it on site. But if we would have installed it on site and planted on site, it would be not only disaster in terms of irrigation and making sure that everything works as we close each single day, we would plant probably for entire months. Maintenance. One of the advantages that we also bring to the client, we are the only ones actually doing it on that scale. And therefore, we are able to maintain that many projects. When you maintain 10 jobs, that's no problem. But when you start maintaining more than 10 jobs, you want to keep an eye on every single project, what's going on. So we do have remote monitoring, which tracks 3 criteria: moisture, temperature, and light. So it's a device, it's a sensor which we insert in every single in every single installation we have. And every single morning, technical director checks every single wall for stable criteria for each of the set parameters for each wall. Okay, so just to summarize our process, we do site analysis for the purposes of knowing the sun exposure, where it's going to be located, additional obstructions, irrigation requirements, etc. We design the living wall, we pre-plant it at the nursery, as I mentioned. Then we have 2 mobilizations on site. So therefore, typical installation on an average size of the job will be literally 2 days. The first day is a hardware irrigation. Hardware, which are J brackets on which we will mount the panel. an irrigation setup. And then the next day, we will do panel installation of the pre-planted panels. In many cases, in the new construction jobs, what happens is that hardware and irrigation setup may take place literally during the dirty part of the constructions. Like anytime when we're still in the dusty type of the environment, all those things can be done. But the panel installation of already pre-planted panels can only be done like a decorative element, red carpet item, when no paint, no spray paint, no dust work is in the area. We bring the panels, we install them, and we are done. And of course, then we offer maintenance. Typical maintenance is one visit a month is sufficient to maintain living wall, assuming that there is remote monitoring of the irrigation system. And one of the questions, because I've done these presentations many times, people ask, what happens in the hurricane? And I have the answer for you, nothing. Well, this is an example after Irma. So as you can see, the pictures were taken the next day post Irma. The only problem we had that, like, for example, those columns, they are in Golden Beach. They did not have water for 7 days. Even then, the sphagnum moss was able to sustain it for a few days, and they had to hose it with the water. But the plants didn't get ripped, because all the rooting, even if you want to pull out a healthy plant, it's literally impossible. You have to cut it out. It's so rooted within that it's really, really hard to take anything out, as opposed to the systems where you have a container or planter, which will fly. All right, and now best practices. I just want to show you a couple of examples. We have like 5 minutes to go through, and then I'll leave. I would love to give you a floor to ask any questions. So, zero failure. None of our installation, which is more than 130, has failed. So this is the example of our largest installation, which is in Hollandale on Collins Avenue. It is facing Collins. The building is called 2000 Ocean. So it's a 4-story garage. As I mentioned, I wanted to give you an example of the proportions. Our typical size job for the residential would be around 10 panels. Each panel is 8 feet high by 3 feet wide. This is 85 panel job. So this is how it was installed. This is one of our latest installations. As I mentioned to you, I showed already one example, Lagos Island, 98 Lagos. The house is for sale for $75 million. This example, we just installed it 2 days ago. And I wanted to kind of show you what is special about this job. So there are two things that I would like to emphasize. Number one, we had limitations in terms of we could not attach to the wall. So the wall, the orange wall behind the installation, is a neighbor's house. It's in Deeren Bay Estates. So you cannot attach anything to the wall, and therefore those are supposed to be freestanding structures. But because of the height and they had to be very strong and vertical. So the leg, as you can see, that L-shaped leg couldn't really be behind, because then you have a big difference between the wall and the leg. So what we have decided is that we will have an inverted slope. And then the design was to integrate it into the landscaping. So as to creating the effect as if the living wall flows down and all the colors are flowing down to the landscaping. This is one of the examples in Pinecrest, also a very recent job. You cannot really see this on the picture, but you can see that the windows are dark. So the living wall actually has a perpendicular window on the right-hand side. And therefore, when you are going to the house, it looks double the length. This is the same house. So they have the living wall in the front and living wall in the back. And they have a lot of wood structure around. So this was a decision, instead of making just one long piece, to have it framed like this. And we did the entire installation, including framing. Just to show you that a lot of high-tech offices are now bringing the living walls into the buildings. So this is an office in Wynwood. And this is an example of double wall where you have, it's the same wall, so it's a sandwich, but on one side, it's a conference room where you have TV. On the other side, it's an open floor plan with lots of sitting for computer people. So it's a double wall. It has one irrigation set. It's beautiful. And you can actually walk by it and you feel very, very refreshed. And another example where we had, again, emphasize those pillars or those columns where the living walls there are 4 sections identical in width, but they integrated within those architectural elements. This example, again, I wanted to emphasize how you can use a mirror and have a completely different impact. This is a very tiny wall in the residential project in Fisher Island interior, but once the mirror was installed, which is a perpendicular, very small part of the wall, the entire corner has changed. This is one of my favorite jobs. It's a private yoga studio, like private barn in Wellington. She has, you will see the first picture, like a view from the left and now view from the right. So beautiful doors to the yoga studio and then 2 absolutely gorgeous living walls. This is a house of ex-house of Chris Bosch, which was remodeled and renovated, and now the new owner has the living wall. So this living wall example has a nice framing, wooden frame. This is an example of, I love this kind of projects. They're so cute, where you have the patio and you integrate everything in a niche. So everything is not just like a from corner to corner living wall, but it's meant to be. You cannot imagine anything else but living wall there. The staircase, again, we could put just a plain rectangular piece across horizontal layout, but when I looked at those stairs, and they are actually not very symmetrical and even, this is what we have proposed, and it did work beautifully. Example of Fort Lauderdale, this living wall, again, it's not a mega size, but the beauty of it is that it just matched the entrance and all those metal elements. No matter how you enter the house, you see it as a picture frame. This example, very unique for us. It's in Bell Harbor. We call it vegetable garden. So 70% of the living wall consists of tomatoes, carrots, pepper, cilantro, strawberries, sage, mint, lavender, and all of the above. And it did last. It did last. Another. This example is, okay, I'm wrapping up. Inside of the same room, but they are kind of facing each other, 2 walls facing each other, but we did work with the same plants, but different designs. So it worked out very beautifully. Another example on Fisher Island, where they have these huge terraces on the first floor units, and they just don't know how to dress it up. So this is how it's dressed up, by living wall system. Beautiful entrance in Pinecrest. And this is an example of Weston, where people wanted to actually hide a window. They didn't like the window because it's not symmetrically placed on that wall. So the living wall actually brought the symmetry to the space. And then you can see another piece of the living wall around those doors. This is one of the largest residential projects, not by size, but how much is covered within the same space. It's a whole courtyard, the entire courtyard in Wellington. And we've been published in the collection of 100 living walls. The book is called Exterior Green Wall Design. And now I would like to open the floor for the questions. And this is my our contact information, we really encourage you to take a look on our Instagram account, try to share it with your clients, let them be more confident with what they're engaging with if they are considering living walls. So thank you so much for your attention. Now I would like to ask if you guys have any questions. Okay, so I'm looking at the chat. I mean, you guys can, I don't know if you, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, hi, everyone.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. This is
perfect.
Robert
So
Wertheimer.
Hello, Robert.
Yeah, so I put in one of the questions about, which I think you answered partially later, but which, are there any preferred orientations? Or do you just
orientations
adjust?
in terms of the sun?
Yeah.
I got it. Yeah. Well, I can tell you that we have done them all, and it all definitely affects the plant selection. So I would say my favorite installations would be north exposure, north facing walls, or east facing. So because the east will get sun in the morning, then it will be at the end of the day. And of course, north is typically does not get much sun. The most challenging is south exposure. Yeah. North and east are the best. All right. Any more questions? Okay, I'm in chat, so I see the message. What specific aspects of maintenance was not done properly on the PEM? Okay, so the question is, what specific aspects of maintenance was not done properly at the Paris Museum of Art? I mean, we've been, they did address a lot of questions to us, and we did answer a lot of questions. So number one is that the engineering of the irrigation system, the water was actually feeding the entire living wall system from the rooftop, and all those pipes were not insulated properly, so the water was very warm, very hot in general. So the water that would feed those columns was overheated in most of the time. That's number one. Number two is, again, it's a drip irrigation rinse, so the rinse has drippers. So when the water drips down, it goes to the side and doesn't spread, especially on the column. How can you irrigate the column, which is the cylinder, by dripper? So the water was constantly overwatered. A lot of plants died simply because they rotted. And as I mentioned already, it's a soil-based system. So it's a pocket with the soil. Once the water goes through the soil, nothing catches the moisture. It just leaches through. So the plants just simply, I mean, it's not like you get the water and they start drinking. No, nothing was absorbing enough the water, and therefore it was either overwatered at all times, or it was not spreading the moisture around the column. So that was primary difference. All right, more questions. How much a living wall per square foot? The cost of the living wall, what we do, I will tell you our pricing. So, and we are not the most expensive company out there. So our average safe number, of course, the smaller it is, the bigger, the higher the price per square foot, because there is fixed cost, such as irrigation equipment, irrigation setup. So those are that is fixed component, and variable costs based on the size, such as panels, plants, J brackets, etc. So an average number is $140 a square foot for turnkey installation. On the smaller jobs, it may go as high as $180, $190 a square foot. On a larger jobs, it can drop down to $110 a square foot. All right, let's see if I have more questions. Even more, thank you for clarification. Thank you so much.
Well, given that last information, what would be the smallest size project?
The smallest size project, which we, again, it all depends on the clientele, but we still do what is called 3-panel installation. So this would be our smallest. 3-panel installation would be 8 feet 3 inch high by 9 feet 9 inch wide. So roughly 8 by 10. 8 by 10 would be our smallest. We certainly can do any custom size, but it just, the wall becomes a golden wall if it's smaller than that. All right. Any more questions? I guess that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. I would like to close this presentation, and I hope you guys had valuable information that you now can use. Thank you so much. If you would like to get a copy of the presentation, I'll be more than happy. You can send me an email, I'll send it to you.
Hey, do you still need to be online?
No, Cheryl, I'm just copying those names and to send to Marilyn. Names and for the CE credit. So whatever has been done in the chat, I copied it to my email right now, and then I'll see if they send something in the email.
Okay, well, I can.
Yeah. We can done. No. I'm done. I'm gonna send it to Marilyn.
Okay, and I can send you the chat.
All right. No, I'm good. I copied everything. I'm
You
good.
got it? You're good?
I got it. I got it.
All right, kiddo.
Okay,
Looks
thank
like
you
it
so
went
much.
well.
As
You had
always.
22.
Yeah, good turnout. Yeah, good turnout.
Great. All right,
All right.
sweetie. Thank you.
Thank you so much for everything. Thank you.
My pleasure. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye. You too. Thanks.